Kia ora koutou, it's Mr. Demystifier here after quite a long gap with a video on anger. So I wasn't planning to make a video on anger, but it's come up for an individual. Somebody's asked me about this, and I thought it would be, as always, I find it useful to reply in the form of a video, express myself through that medium, because contemporary dance doesn't work for me. And I thought I'd make this as a general video as well, because this is relevant to everyone, isn't it? Anger. And this is kind of off the top of my head, but obviously as a psychotherapist, anger is something that I think about quite a lot and work with a lot. So it's the top of a well-informed, if somewhat grizzled head that I'm doing this. I suppose my kind of thoughts on, there are several thoughts on anger really. There are two places where I could start really. One is looking at anger as a kind of continuum. There are different kinds of anger. Maybe you could look at them as something that's on a scale. But before we get onto that, I think looking at, the most important thing, I think, to clarify that anger is a good thing. People talk about anger, people use the term negative emotions. I don't think there are any negative emotions. All of our emotions are there for a reason. They're all useful. The reason that we have lots of difficulties with them is because human beings, in the greater scheme of things, haven't been living the kind of modern urban lifestyle that we now live for very long. We've been spending far more time probably as kind of intelligent apes, and then masses of time as hunter-gatherers, a short amount of time as farmers, and then a teeny tiny amount of time as modern humans that have jobs and drive cars and all that kind of thing. So our emotions haven't adapted as well as they might have to modern living, and that's why we need psychotherapists. That's why we need all kinds of things, to keep us sane and well. Really, it's not necessarily something we can just assume is going to be okay. It's something that we have to kind of compensate and put a bit of effort into. So, why is anger good? Because, a lot of people say, well, anger's horrible, and anger makes people do horrible things, and, anger doesn't feel very nice. I'm filming this on my phone, and a big stonking great big message came across the screen, and it was distracting me, so that's why you got the thumb on the screen then. So, if we didn't have anger, we'd be dead, because anger is what stops us being walked all over. So anger is not a bad thing, and I think it's really important. If you take nothing away from this video, then anger is not a bad thing. Take that away with you. So if we didn't have anger, we would all be walked all over, and there would be no disincentive for walking over other people. It would be kind of crazy. And also anger, even in the modern world, even though it's a primal defense mechanism against saber-toothed tigers and enemy tribes, anger has made amazing things happen. I suspect that there's a good deal of anger that made Rosa Parks stay on the bus, stay in her seat. Good deal of anger that made all the big kind of social changes happen. And where I live, there's a big history of, there's a country that was colonised, and in the 1800s there was basically a process whereby land was stolen from the original inhabitants of this country on a massive scale, and when people objected in one way or another, either peacefully or violently, they were submitted to atrocities. So there is such a thing as, anger is righteous. We need anger. Anger stops bad things happening sometimes. Maybe it stops them happening twice. So without anger, we wouldn't get very far, really. The problem is, so anger is not a problem. Okay, what we do with anger is another matter. That's about behaviour. And so things that people have a problem with is they can have, if they've got an anger, there's different kinds of anger problems, I suppose. There's one is to do with the level of anger, and that's where we'll get back to that kind of sliding scale or that continuum. And the other is to do with how you respond to anger, what you do with that anger. So some people channel their anger into exercise, or channel it into something positive, or channel it into politics or activism or making things better. And some people act on their anger in a destructive way, which is destructive both for them and for whoever might be on the receiving end of that anger. So that's not good for anyone. So that's how you respond to anger. The continuum of anger. Let's have a look at that. I'm making this up. I'm making this up on the spot, but it's like I say, it's based on years of working with this stuff. I suppose. One of the things that people overlook, it's a little bit like when people talk about eating disorders, they talk and focus primarily on the things like the anorexia nervosa and bulimia, and the disorders that focus a lot around self-starving or purging, whereas compulsive overeating isn't usually looked at as an eating disorder, which I think is a great travesty, and I've done another video on this. So basically, there is a way for people that have problems with weight through compulsive overeating, there is a free lifelong support service that works that nobody uses because too many people were making money out of weight loss issues, weight loss treatments, so-called weight loss treatments. And I think that's another one of the reasons why compulsive overeating isn't looked at properly. But it's kind of ignored when people talk about eating disorder. If you say an eating disorder, people don't tend to think of compulsive overeating. That's the point I'm trying to make in a very long-winded way. And likewise, when people talk about an anger problem, you have an anger problem if you don't experience anger. People that say, "Oh, we never get angry." That's not good. Be proud of that. That's not a good sign. If someone's trying to molest your partner, somebody's trying to harm your child, you need to raise up some anger to protect your loved ones. So if you're never experiencing anger, something's gone wrong there. You've stuffed it down. So it doesn't mean I'm not getting on your case and saying that you're a bad person. Is a very common thing, and we do it through things like trauma, through childhood upbringing where we're not allowed to express or feel our emotions. So not getting angry is an anger problem. Okay, and then I suppose if you look at different kinds of anger, I don't know whether some of these would sit at different places on the scale. There's kind of hot anger, there's cold anger, there's rage, there's resentment, there's irritability. All of these, I would say, are either feelings that have a form of anger or have got a component of anger within them. Okay, and you could be experiencing one of these or many of these. So, irritability can be quite kind of low level. It can be being a bit kind of grumpy, being a bit tetchy, being a bit. What is it they call it in this country? Is it toey or toesy? Toey, which is a weird word for a pom like me to hear. So general irritation. Maybe that's you've got maybe on the far left of the scale you've got suppression of anger. not allowing yourself to feel anger. Then you've got kind of irritation, which kind of bubbles up kind of fairly low level at kind of small things in a kind of grumpy, tetchy way. But it's not like shouting and bawling. It's not violent, but it's still not great. It still can cause lots of problems, lots of relationship problems. And then hot anger, cold anger, rage. These things all have slightly different qualities, So, but I suppose in the middle of this scale, there's always a healthy point in the middle. And in the middle of the scale, sorry, outside the phone bleeping. In the middle of the scale would be what we call healthy anger, which is a proportional responsive anger. Okay. So what that means is that our anger is proportional to the situation. Okay. So if somebody's driving slowly in front of you, and you go into, extreme anger and you want to beat them up, that's not healthy anger. That's extreme, and we'll come onto that in a minute. But to be a little bit irritated, that would be a kind of an appropriate response to that, depending on the circumstances. I mean, I've done videos about driving in this country, and it's crazy. The shadow side of people comes out in driving here. So if you slow down, the other day I just slowed down a little bit because I was looking for a chemist. I was driving along, so I was, driving a little bit more slowly in this high street. And somebody, behind toots their horn, because they can't wait. In the UK, people wouldn't do that, not unless you did it for ages. This is a real rambly one, isn't it? If it's the first time you've watched this channel, by the way, this is how I do my videos. Okay, so this is my style. So if you don't like it, switch off now. Don't watch any of my other videos, because they're all like this, full of rambles and tangents. But I think the rambles and tangents are rather charming. But there we go. So proportionate anger. Okay, so somebody's driving a little bit slowly in front of you. You get a bit irritable. That's kind of that's kind of proportionate. If you're kind of losing it, if you're kind of seeing red, if your heart's beating out of your chest, and you're in a cold sweat, that is disproportionate. So healthy anger is when it's proportionate to what's going on. Okay, so if somebody was trying to harm your child, you would experience extreme anger in that situation, but that would be proportionate because that's what's required for that situation. And if you experience injustice, not necessarily in the moment, but like historic injustice, it's quite appropriate to feel anger about that as well. And we should, and more people should, because it's apathy and people that do nothing that perpetuate all these things. So come back to this scale. Okay, you've got not able to connect with your anger on the far left of the scale. Then you've got kind of mild level, kind of tetchy, grumpy, irritable, cranky. I wonder how many synonyms there are for irritable. I'll probably think of loads more afterwards. And then right in the middle, you've got kind of proportionate. So you've got proportionate anger. So I would say, so not expressing anger would be on one extreme. The middle would be healthy expression of anger. To the right of the middle would be the tetchiness. And then you get differing degrees of disproportionate anger. On the far right would be rage. Okay. Rage is quite interesting. There's different understandings and beliefs about what rage is. Some people say that rage is a mixture of anger and shame, which I think is kind of quite interesting. But the more you get to the right-hand side, so rageful kind of behaviour is, the high levels of anger would be kind of like appropriate in certain situations. But if you jump straight to rage, that's your kind of go-to. When the person is driving slowly, that's when you've got a problem. And the reason I would say 99% of the time that somebody would have that problem is because they have something very real and very valid to be angry about. Okay, and it might not even be something that they consciously remember, because it might be something to do with abuse in childhood or neglect in childhood. Both of those things can produce kind of extreme feelings of anger. So if you think about baby, completely dependent on caregivers, mum, dad, whoever is looking after the baby, for food, for nappy change, for everything really, for cuddles, for entertainment, and that baby is left and left and left and left. They don't know, that mum's on the way, maybe, or that they're not actually going to ultimately have to wait that long. For them, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And that's, that kind of experience. So if you've had that experience, we probably all had a little bit of that in childhood, but some people have had a lot of that because they've been neglected, they've been abused. So they've got this anger. And when you have that disproportionate anger, when you're more angry about something than it really deserves, like the person driving slowly down the high street, and you lose it, you're not angry with the person that's driving slowly down the high street. That's just a trigger. That's just something that's brought up some current anger, and along with it is a whole stack of pent-up anger from a lifetime. Maybe from things that you don't remember, maybe from things before you learn to speak. So pre-verbal memories are kind of interesting because you don't remember them in the same way. It's like we tend to kind of put words to everything. We use language to think, but we didn't always do that because we didn't always have language. So pre-verbal abuse can have that real kind of primal animalistic kind of rage. So if you've got this anger problem, first of all, don't think of yourself as a bad person, okay? If you do have an anger problem, it's probably got you into a lot of trouble. Even if it's not expressing your anger, would have got you into a lot of trouble. So first things first, it doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a person with an anger problem, and an anger problem can be healed. Okay. Over time, in a number of different ways. I think I might do a part 2 to kind of look at ways of dealing with an anger problem, and I suppose maybe kind of briefly kind of just list some of the most kind of common ones. So one of the biggest ones is assertiveness training. Assertiveness training is interesting. I've done a video on assertiveness training. People think that assertiveness is for people who are very passive, who don't speak up for themselves, who need to learn how to. And often that is the case, but assertiveness is equally useful for people that can only express themselves in an extreme way. And it's a way of kind of reining in. So it's focusing more on the behaviour. So it's more about what you do with the anger. But when you change the behaviours, you also change the anger response. So assertiveness training is a big one. And really kind of therapy, general therapy, counselling, psychotherapy that deals with the issues that made you angry in the first place, and where you can put them where they rightfully belong. And ideally, allow yourself to feel some of that anger with the therapist and project it towards the people who rightfully belongs to be vented at. That was a very clunky sentence, wasn't it? So any kind of therapy where you talk about your anger, and you, particularly if you allow yourself to get in touch with some of it and remind yourself where it belongs, who it belongs to. It doesn't belong to your partner who you get grumpy with. It doesn't belong to you, because most people actually direct anger inwardly. That's a huge thing. Often self-talk, the way people talk to people say horrible things to themselves in their heads, and some forms of self-harming. Now, a lot of self-harming is about a release of pressure, but there are some forms of self-harming or elements in self-harming which are about kind of anger. I get the sense that often cutting is probably more about relieving tension and feeling a physical pain rather than emotional pain. But when people punch themselves, often that's because they're directing their anger towards themselves. And that's really not good. If you do that, again, I'm not making you bad, saying you're bad, stupid, or wrong for doing that. This is the thing. We respond. All these things are a normal response to an abnormal situation, and the issue is what made you angry in the first place. So yeah, that's a few things to think of. I suppose there is a degree as well of habit with anger. Not just kind of habit, but a pattern that the body gets into, because all these things, all emotions have a physical counterpart. I talked about, I gave some examples earlier on of, sort of sweating or your heart thumping away and all those kind of things. That's something we can talk a bit more about, because that's all to do with parts of the nervous system, which we can regain more control over with certain techniques. But the takeaway I want you to have really, anger is not bad. It's what you do with anger, it's how you express that anger, and there are healthy ways of expressing anger and unhealthy ways of expressing anger. There are different kinds of anger. The healthiest form of anger is a proportional anger that's you only get as angry as the situation really merits. And in that situation, you also still have a good level of self-control, and you make good choices about how you express that anger and what you do with that anger. Which doesn't mean just stuffing it down either, because that's not good for you. Anger is, something that keeps us alive. We need to have anger. If we're not experiencing anger, then I suggest take a look at that, do some work on that, because that's not healthy. And if you've got disproportionate anger, if your anger kind of reaches a boiling point over a tiny thing, or seemingly tiny thing, that's usually to do with old anger from the past, and you're probably entirely justified in feeling that anger. But the thing is, and I suppose this is the final kind of point I'll make, is that anger, all emotions, they're kind of supposed to come and go, but they're not supposed to stay in one emotional state for a massive amount of time. We're supposed to kind of go back to like baseline after being angry. So long-term, chronic anger that's been around for years and years is not good for you. That is not serving you. That is not helping you. And that's where kind of resentment comes in. So the word resent, if you break it apart, it's resent. It's that anger that keeps getting sent back again and again and again. It's things that you're hanging on to, and they're really bad. It's really bad for the body. It puts a lot of stress on the body. It's not a nice thing to experience. And obviously people don't hang on to anger because they're silly sausages. They hang on to it because it just becomes part of their experience, and almost like that's who I am. But it's not, and you can let go of that, because the most important person here is you. And I want you to feel well. I want you to be able to experience peace and calm and tranquility, and to be content. Not all the time, because nobody will all the time, but to be able to have experiences of that and times of that, and maybe even for that to be your kind of baseline and your general, where your emotions generally sit most of the time when not much else is going on. And in order to do that, if you've got this chronic anger, then that's something that is definitely worth working on. Okay, so, and I said that was the last point, but I'm going to come up with one more. And that is that there are some situations where, even though we might not want to admit it, we quite like anger. So, for example, ADHD. I have ADHD. I can get very angry, but part of me loves it, because if you've got ADHD, feeling angry, although it's generally not that great, is far better than feeling just dopamine starved and bored and empty and hollow, which is how ADHD people feel when there's not much going on. So ADHD, people that have ADHD often will generate anger. They'll create situations where they wind themselves up, or kind of set somebody else up to wind them up, or see something as unfair when maybe it isn't, or overreact, because it will, it kind of creates all these strong sensations and feelings, which makes you feel alive and, slightly better than how you would have felt if you were just, not doing that. And I think a lot of other people just get excited, people do get kind of, it's not strictly an addiction, but it's kind of got some of the qualities of an addiction. It's kind of a fix. So it can become habitual, and there can be an element of enjoyment in the anger. Often we don't even recognize that or allow ourselves to recognize that, but that can be there as well. A lot of behaviors that don't change, that we keep doing, we do them because there's a payoff, or what we call a secondary gain. So I'm very guilty of that. I'm kind of one of these angry of Tunbridge Wells people that writes angry emails and things like that. I'm getting better with that now, because I've got more awareness of why I do it. And there are kind of parts of that process that I enjoy and parts of that process that I don't enjoy. I don't enjoy, that sort of sense of, that knot in the stomach and that, the racing heart. I don't like all that. Sometimes I like a bit of a battle, but only to a point, really. So I'm able to recognise now why I put myself in those situations and what I'm getting from it, and what I don't want to get from it, and kind of control it a bit more so it kind of suits me. So I can talk more about all of these things. There's so much you can talk about with anger, really. But that's a kind of a starting point. Like I say, I might kind of do a part 2, but if you've got any questions, or if there's anything, already comments, or anything you'd like me to focus more on, then I'm more than happy to. Would hope to be kind of doing a follow-up on this at some point. But if not, kind of check out some of the other videos that I've alluded to earlier that kind of touch on similar subject, like assertiveness. Done a video on that. Done videos on ADHD. So check those out. And thank you for watching, and please give us a like if you like it. If you didn't like it, then don't press a dislike, just kind of part company as friends, and because not everybody likes everything, and my channel is kind of pretty weird. My presentation style is pretty unusual, and not the average kind of slick presentation that you get with other channels. So and also you could support me on Patreon. You could subscribe, good old-fashioned subscribe, and click the little bell icon, and then you get notified whenever I do a video. And I do videos on all sorts of things, mainly retroactive jealousy, but masses of other stuff as well, serious stuff, silly stuff. The last video I posted for this one was I just did a video of the lunar eclipse over the sea, which was kind of just a short one, just for people to enjoy. So thank you for watching, and it's okay to be angry. It doesn't make you bad, but you don't have to stay angry, okay? And help is there. There are ways out of it, and you can get yourself to a calmer place, and I hope you do. Rangimarie.